6 p.m. right here in the city of Douala, same time in Bamenda, which is the chief town of the Northwest region. Good evening, dear viewers of Equinoxe Television. Thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the news. Calm is gradually returning to several parts of Cameroon after days of violent protest sparked by what they qualify as the rigging of the presidential election results. However, the impact of the unrest remains visible, with shops, schools and travel agencies still closed. Gas stations were crowded today, with vehicles and motorbikes struggling to access fuel amid severe shortage. Away from that, we tell you how the United Nations Secretary General and Human Rights Watch have raised alarms over the escalating post-electoral violence in Cameroon, condemning the use of excessive force against civilians. In separate statements, both entities have urgently called for restraint, emphasizing the need to protect human rights and ensure peaceful resolution of disputes. Those are top stories tonight. The news in full in a jiffy. Thank you so much for choosing Equinoxe Television. For presentation, I am Immaculate Fogwe. Douala is still reeling from the pre- and post-electoral violence that erupted in several parts of the country following the Constitutional Council's publication of election results. Schools and travel agencies remain closed due to a fear of potential unrest. Our reporter Smajikan Gabriel visited some of the schools and travel agencies and reports on its current state.
At the main gate of the government bilingual high school in Akwa, parents have come to see for themselves if lectures are effectively going on before allowing the children back to school. I came to ensure that classes are effectively taking place since there have been disorder in town. I'm a worker but can't go out because of the situation. So I said, I can't send my child to school and start worrying about her. Reasons I came to check for myself if classes are on, and I will send her to school. In another private college we visited, we met empty benches and a quiet school compound with just one teacher present. The school is open, but students are not there. Last Wednesday, during the assembly, we told the students that they should be prudent. On Tuesday, some came but later left. Teachers have difficulties coming to work due to their distance and issues of transportation. In an almost empty street, we drove to some traveling agencies within the heart of Douala, while some of the agencies' main gate remained locked, with all buses blocked inside. At another bus agency, though the buses are on standby, the mail service was effective. Sunday we managed to work, but since Monday we have had a breakdown in our activities. Nevertheless, the mail service is active because we have an obligation to put in a minimum service. The absence of activities at these bus agencies do have an effect on those who used to do business around the place. We are not selling because of no circulation, no customers, and bus agencies are not open. And if things remain this way, what are we going to eat? And we have families. The only thing I'd ask is for peace to return. Most Douala inhabitants are now hoping to have better days ahead.
And after 3 days of continuous protests in various towns across the country, several supermarkets and filling stations have remained closed, causing significant hardship for motorbike riders. Our reporter Mala Glory spoke with some bikers who expressed disappointment over the current situation in Cameroon. Her report.
We are in Mobile Bonakamwa neighborhood, where several bike riders queued up in front of one of the few filling stations still open in the city of Douala this Wednesday, October 29, hoping to have few liters of fuel.
I have been here for hours waiting to get some liters of fuel because most filling stations are closed. Since 8 a.m., I've been struggling to buy fuel to no avail. It is true some filling stations have been burnt, but it is not our fault. Right now, most filling stations are closed. I finally had to cover a long distance to get here when I learned it was open.
A long wait that seems to go on forever, followed by tensions and discouragement. Away from there is another gas station at Ancien Dalip in the Douala 2 subdivision, where the situation is even more complicated. The gas station is completely closed.
Since morning till this hour, I have not seen any open filling station. I got here hoping to buy fuel, but nothing.
A situation which officials of these filling stations say it's delicate and will need quick measures to avoid the worst.
It is difficult. You can agree with me that the problem is deepening than we thought. We now plead with the government to bring things to normal like before.
It is the same scenario in several supermarkets. In Bonaberi Douala 4, for example, some supermarkets have preferred to remain closed, fearing unrest and hoping that calm will return. Those that remain open are operating at a reduced capacity.
The person that comes to supply us, he's not coming again. That is why I come here to come and buy. I wanted the bread for 3,000, but they are selling for 1,000 francs. If you want for 3,000, they will give you for 1,000. They cannot give more than 1,000 because people are many to buy.
In Douala, life moves at a snail's pace amid uncertainty and anxiety. While some hope for a swift return to normalcy, others fear that the economic trend will become a long-term problem.
And from Douala, we now move to Buea, precisely at the Mile 17 motor park, which has now become quieter due to insecurity on the roads, leaving many travelers stranded and forcing others to alter their plans. Despite the Douala road being deemed risky because of the ongoing protest, it remains the only option for many. A handful of drivers continue to ply the route, but most are hesitant due to safety concerns. The widespread protests are having a devastating impact on daily life, affecting drivers, passengers, and their families alike. More with our Buea-based correspondent, Rex Afon.
The Mile 17 motor park in Buea has in recent days witnessed a striking decline in activity. The first to feel the impact are road users, travelers whose routines have been upended.
We are loading small vehicles because we are using the Manfay route. So the big vehicle, they are not coming to load. So because the situation of the country now, because they were supposed to pass the Bafang, but there's no way for them to pass.
The fare that we are paying now is 10,000 francs. As of 6.5 that we're paying from Buea to Bamenda, you can imagine. And the situation economically is so very difficult presently.
Though the security situation along this stretch is far from the ideal, it remains the only path available.
That area also is very dangerous because looking around the Konye, reaching around Manfay, we have a lot of bushes around, there is a lot of forest, and the insecurity also is there. So we just feel that in anything we are doing, we don't have a choice, and it's only God that is really going to take us through.
A few drivers have begun to defy the odds, braving the road to carry passengers to Douala.
I arrived here at 4:30 in the morning. It's just two vehicles that they have struggled to reach Douala. So people are afraid to travel. I'm a transporter. There are people who are struggling to go to Yaoundé. There are no cars leaving from Buea to Yaoundé, so they are trying to see where they can catch vehicles from Douala to Yaoundé.
This shift has only deepened the misery for many drivers in Buea.
Since the day of the proclamation of the presidential result, nothing is moving. We have been here since Monday till today, Wednesday. We feed our family through transportation. So right now, since morning, I left my house coming here. Since Monday, there's no work. I need to feed my family. I need to pay my children's school fees. But right now, there's no means.
With protests igniting in parts of the country, every sector continues to feel the stench.
And from Buea, we now move to Bamenda, which is a chief town of the northwest region, where calm appeared to reign on the surface, but beneath it, Residents are already feeling the pinch of hardship as post-election violence grips major cities across Cameroon. Our reporter Mbustela paints a picture of the capital city in her report.
At several travel agencies across Bamenda, silence replaces the usual chatter of travelers and ticket vendors. Management turned down requests to speak on camera, many citing fear of the unknown. Unlike previous days when passengers streamed in to book tickets, most agency yards today remain deserted, an unusual scene in a city known for its early morning and late evening rush. On the streets, fewer taxis are seen plying the roads, and residents say transport fares and the prices of basic goods have already begun to soar. Though Bamenda has so far stayed clear of open post-electoral street protests, the ripple effects of the unrest in other cities are hitting hard, tightening livelihoods and heightening uncertainty.
And in the same vein, prominent figures across various sectors have spoken out about the tense post-electoral climate in Cameroon. Taking to their social media handles, they condemn the ongoing violence, destruction and loss of life. They warn that the situation could deteriorate further, drawing parallels with the unresolved Anglophone crisis which has lingered under the Buea administration. Innocent Aze compiles some of their reactions in this report.
As the post-electoral protest prolongs with multiplication of violent and bloody clashes between the population and the forces of law and order across Cameroon, personalities from the traditional and cultural backgrounds refuse to confine their reactions. Music artist Caress Fotso in a post writes, "I have seen bloody images of our children and siblings. Yes, I cry and tremble helplessly. Everyone has their way to exteriorize their suffering and misery. My dear brothers, please do not destroy, vandalize, burn and take away human life." She thinks this chaos would have been avoided if there existed a slight feeling of humanity and if someone was listening to them and taking their plight into consideration. Caress Fotso regrets that while the people bleed, some laugh, celebrate and make mockery of the people to cause more pain. She asks President Paul Biya what he wants again that he has not achieved from power for 43 years. Joining her is also the music artist Salatel, who writes that the current scenarios in the French-speaking regions of Cameroon reflect what he had experienced in Buea, southwest region, between 2016 and 2018. It usually begins with a series of complaints, reclamations by the population, divergent reactions and agitations on social media, then results to a peaceful protest that gradually shapes to violence when counter-provocations and accusations catch flames. When neglected, it moves to force and threats. Same reaction of forces of law and order, leading to loss of lives, with the population radicalized to gradually end up with arms in their hands to fight back. Bandits then join to worsen everything. Killing and kidnapping surface with migration inevitable, causing a refugee crisis. According to Salatel, the present uprising can be stopped now while it is still early, before it ends like the now 8-year-old Anglophone crisis that was minimized. In another reaction, His Royal Majesty Sokoju Jean Rameau of the Bamenda people in the West region writes how he is emptying the tears in his eyes, watching a Cameroon he sacrifices all since 1955 being ruined than given more. A deplorable historical trend I have witnessed lately, he writes. The traditional ruler pays homage to those who have already lost their lives in the ongoing regrettable political situation that could have been avoided. He, however, condemns the peaceful protest that turned violent with enormous destructions on private and public structures. Leaders of the nation have also been asked to uphold a minimum degree of humility and accord respect to the people they rule, regretting how their arrogance, disrespect and irresponsibility have driven Cameroon into a dungeon. He reminds authorities to learn from the Anglophone crisis. Former U.S. Secretary General for African Affairs, Sibon Nash, makes a mockery statement that the Buea clan is already planning to present Paul Buea as presidential candidate at the age of 99, and with no doubt he shall be declared winner with the results already known, like that of the October 12, 2025 presidential election that he never doubted.
Innocent as reporting there. And away from post-electoral tensions, the administrative authorities of Jombe, Penja and Loum, all in the Mongo division, have warned against any attempts to disrupt peace and order in their jurisdictions. The warning comes after fake rumors spread on Tuesday, October 28, about alleged separatist fighters seen in Loum, Jombe, Penja and Kongsamba. Both divisional officers have organized meetings to calm residents and also maintain order, as A.C. Luciliangu tells us.
Panic swept through Jombe, Penja, Loum, Manjo and Kongsamba in the Mongo division of the littoral region on Tuesday morning following false rumors that Ambazonia fighters were in the towns.
Il y a un bensiquineur qui est parti de Penja, il est entré et il a commencé à faire le bruit. C'est mauvais à Penja.
The message, reportedly spread by an unidentified bike rider, sent parents rushing to schools, students running helter-skelter, and markets closed.
Il n'y a rien à Penja.
Reacting swiftly, the divisional officer of Njombe Penja gathered the inhabitants to assure them of their safety and to restore calm.
Nous allons le rechercher.
Invoke Armstrong urged the inhabitants to go about their activities normally and allow their children resume classes as security forces have been deployed. In Loum, still in the Mongo division where uncertainty also prevailed, the divisional officer convened an emergency meeting with community leaders and education stakeholders to debunk the rumor and ease public anxiety.
Dans l'arrondissement de Loum en particulier, la rumeur a circulé comme quoi les ambazoniens, entre guillemets, ou des assaillants venus de Njombe Penja devraient d'abord dire à toute l'opinion publique que ces événements ne sont pas vrais.
It was cool, but at 11:15, that is when confusion set in, and even then, some students still refused to go. So I think that the ball should be more in the hands of the parents.
He instructed all actors to ensure that schools reopened, emphasizing that security has been reinforced to guarantee their safety.
Enough has been said. We have discussed about the crisis, about the difficulties and the rumors that caused trouble today. And so we are assured that as we leave this place now, we will sensitize the parents and the children will be in school early tomorrow. I think that with what has been said and the decision we've taken now, tomorrow is going to be better.
However, inhabitants of Loum, Jombe Penja and neighboring localities are calling for security to be tightened and measures taken for lasting peace and protection.
And out of our national frontiers, the United States Embassy in Mali has urged American citizens to leave the country immediately due to rising threats and a severe fuel crisis caused by a blockage imposed by the Al-Qaeda-linked group known as Jamaat. The blockage has crippled Mali's fuel supply, resulting in widespread disruptions in the country. And in Madagascar, a new government was unveiled as part of a transitional period aimed at addressing the country's chronic power and water shortage, economic hardship, and also political divisions. A roundup of these stories with Seti Chakmutio.
Polling stations opened across Tanzania on Wednesday for a national election overshadowed by concerns from human rights groups and the detention of opposition figures. President Samia Suluhu Hassan is seeking a second term under the ruling Shamasha Mapunzi party, which has governed since independence in 1961. Observers say the vote will test Tanzania's commitment to democracy and political freedoms as the election takes place under mounting tension. Amnesty International reports a climate of fear, citing verified cases of enforced disappearances, arbitrary arrest, and extrajudicial killings that, it says, undermine the credibility of the polls. Hassan, who completed the term of her late predecessor, John Pombe Magufuli, now seeks her first full mandate. Elsewhere, the U.S. Embassy in Mali is urging all American citizens to leave the country immediately, warning of rising terror threats and a worsening fuel crisis caused by a Jadi blockage. In a statement, the embassy said travelers should use commercial flights as overland routes are too dangerous with terrorist attacks reported along national highways. It's the second alert in just 3 days, following an earlier warning against travel to Mali because of crime, terrorism, and kidnappings. The Al-Qaeda-linked group announced in September that it had blocked fuel tankers from entering the country, part of its campaign against Mali's ruling military authorities. The impact has been severe on schools and universities, which have shut down nationwide, and transportation has nearly ground to a halt. And 10 days after Michael Randrianirina sworn in as president of the Refoundation of Madagascar, a new government was unveiled on October 28th with an objective to pull the country out of the crisis. But behind the names, both new and recycled, lie complex political power dynamics and the high expectations of the youth. The 29 new ministers is part of a transitional period following the forced resignation of former President Andry Rajoelina, who was ousted after weeks of protest led largely by young people.
Siri Chakutio ending this first part of the news. Talking Point comes up next. My guest tonight on Talking Point is Corbett Ngwine Fulai. He is a thought leader and civil society actor currently based in Bamenda, chief town of the Northwest region. Good evening. It's a pleasure having you live from Bamenda. As I earlier said, my guest tonight is Corbett Ngwine. He is a civil society actor and also a thought leader, and he's currently live with us from Bamenda. Good evening. It's a pleasure having you on Talking Point tonight.
Good evening, Immaculate. Good evening, televiewers of Equinoxe Television. It's always a nice day being with you.
Corbett Ngwine, President Paul Biya has been declared winner of the October 12th presidential election in Cameroon. Did this outcome surprise you, or was it expected?
It would be an overstatement to say that I was surprised with the results of the October 12, 2025 presidential election that were proclaimed on October the 27th. In fact, I'm rather surprised that it took them more than 15 days to put this choreography in place and to bring out the result when we know that only 5 million Cameroonians went to the polls to select from among the 12 candidates. So my surprise is rather the fact that it had to take them all this while when we know for a fact that elections are even rigged before, and this confirms the statement by the National Democratic Institute, the NDI, when in 1992 they actually said that election rigging in Cameroon was diabolical in its nature, inescapable in its reach, and overwhelming in its dimension, and even that the electoral process was actually designed to fail. And so it would have been surprised, although I took part in convincing so many Cameroonians to effectively register and vote. It was more to make Cameroonians understand that it's easy to win, even on the ballot, on the ballot door or the counting ground, it will be a different person that will be declared. And you also know that a thief does not want to be shouted, a thief does not want noise. So it was just to indicate that Cameroonians were disappointed with this system and they needed a different leadership. Although they've won, it's clear that the noise itself that people are making.
There were protests across the country before and even after results were announced by the Constitutional Council, with many denouncing what they qualify as electoral fraud. Several persons are reported dead in several parts of Cameroon, many others arrested. What was the situation like in Bamenda, where you are currently based?
Well, people in Bamenda have been following with rapt attention the outpouring of protests across the nation as the protests against the thwarting of the results, especially the thwarting of the will of the people, because this is not only ridiculous, it is ludicrous. And so it's but normal that people should protest peacefully, if that's the concern of the people. The protest must be peaceful, and that is a democratic right. It is even protected at the regional and international level, and so Cameroonians have a right to protest when they know that the will of the people have been thwarted. But for people in Bamenda, they are watching with keen attention, of course. You know that Bamenda had lived through protests, all kinds of civil unrest since 2016, and so they're watching with a lot of keen attention and actually seeing that it's the playbook that is being exported to other parts of the country. It's a playbook, and Bamenda people are only watching to see how it evolves. And so it's but time for people in Bamenda to also see that people in other parts of the country are also sensitive to the injustices that have been meted on the people of Cameroon, and more particularly because this election addressed a lot of concerns about the conflict in the two English-speaking regions of Cameroon. There was rapt attention in terms of who emerges winner in terms of continuity and change.
Can you tell us what's your overall appraisal on how the government handled these post-electoral tensions?
Immaculate, the 86.37% attributed to the ruling CPDM is reminiscent of what obtained in my village in those school days when we had a giant figure there, an able-bodied guy called Yamton, and he used to be very hot about school but never passing in exams. So when they gave his report card, that was all right, he would rush and show his parents how he has passed very well, and he was almost the first on top of the class. But the moment a literate parent, a literate relation came home and asked to see the report card, who rushed to his back that was just in the hut, a makeshift hut in front of his father's compound, and with a blue pen who changed the 0 to 10, who asked to make it a pass mark. If where they gave him 3, he will add 1 to make it 13. Where they gave him 4, he will add 1 to make it 14, 5, and all that. And so he will virtually just alter the report card to show a pass mark where effectively he passed. And then when he came back to school, since he was heavily built and the teachers were relatively younger and didn't want to fight with a giant buffalo like him, and he would just move him gradually, effortlessly to the next class without anybody stopping him. And that's virtually what happened, because I've been talking even to polling agents who have been taking part in this election, who took part in this election, who actually told me that in the polling station or the polling centers that were there, they were not up to 200. That is including the LECAM staff and the security, defense and security officers that were there. They would not make up 200, but by the moment they went home and in the morning they saw the return sheets, that is the PVs, they were actually showing that the party in question that he represented was having over 400 votes, when he knew that the militants that came to vote were now up to 20, and that the CPDM was having 1,500. The calculation seemed to have just been simple, that when each time when they were in a constituency and they knew that people used to register there, people have registered more than 2,000 in that constituency, they would just do the simple arithmetic of saying, let's give the CPDM 1,500 and divide the remaining 500 to the rest of the parties that were represented in that polling station. That seemed to be having what really obtained and the situation seems to be a choreography that's played out so well that we're seeing that in the Northwest and the Southwest, where people really sat at home. They ruled for 1 month and nobody even went out on that day because there were gunshots in some of the areas and rain followed after. It is said that the Northwest has given the ruling CPDM 86.3.
Now, from your analysis, you seem not to be very convinced about the outcome of the results from the conflict-hit regions. But then, we saw some people jubilating in both regions following the proclamation of results. What do you have to say about that?
Immaculate, I think those who you saw in the videos, and I also saw them at the esplanade of the SGO in Mezam here, those who came out to jubilate after the proclamation of the results, they were actually mostly youths between the ages of 20 to 40. And I'm sure that they were actually jubilating and celebrating the art of the job, the art of how they've perfected their job in terms of in terms of stuffing ballot papers, in terms of outmaneuvering the vigilance of polling agents that mount all the polling stations. And of course, these are the same youths that the 90-year-olds and the 80-years-old, the convene meetings of the 70-year-olds and the 60-year-olds to convince them to go down and perfect the act in terms of rigging the elections in these two regions, because I'm sure there's nothing more than the fact that they were celebrating the fact that they have actually perfected the job to a level that the calculation really favored them, and there's nothing more to that than to beat their chest to the fact that they actually maneuvered even the vigilance of the other polling agents that wanted things done rightly, and so we can't say much about that, but the fact that these are youths that have been being used by the 90 years and the 80 years old that are there, and convene a meeting with the 70-year-olds to send the 60-year-olds on retirement and keep so that the youth continue to work for them. Because after that, beyond the bread and sardine, when you meet them in the bars, you meet them in other places, they're the first to complain that they never received anything beyond the bags of rice that were paraded on TV screens. Beyond that, there's nothing more that we can say about what we saw here in terms of the ridiculous nature of people coming out to celebrate that a 93-year-old person continues to lead them. We'll have a younger, well, we know that over 40% of the population in Cameroon is a youthful population, and that unemployment is spiraling out of control, and that people are dying here every day because those in power can't take any decision. So it's a reverse of rules, and this reverse engineering cannot be explained any further by the fact that...
Thank you, Colben Gwine, for accepting my invitation on Talking Point tonight.
Thank you, Immaculate. Thank you, televiewers of Equinoxe Television. Thank you for the good job you are doing out there and educating and sensitizing Cameroonians as well as informing them. Thank you for the exceptional coverage that Equinoxe did of the 2025 presidential elections. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be there. I'm always grateful when I'm part of this show.
And that's how we saw it on tonight's edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe Television. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for always staying with us, staying in the company of interesting programs on Equinoxe Television. See you tomorrow, same time, God willing. Bye-bye for now.
Well, thank you, Immaculate. Thank you, televiewers of Equinoxe Television. Thank you for the good...